Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm KONRAD GORLISKI and this is the news. Well, early this morning, there was a strong quake at the Zofiówka mine in Jastrzębie-Zdrój. A rescue operation is in progress. 10 miners are still trapped. The Zofiówka mine is located just a few kilometers from the Pniówek mine, where several methane explosions occurred just a couple days ago on Wednesday and Thursday. The quake occurred at 3:40 a.m. in the passage of the preparatory work area at deck 412 at a depth of 900 meters. The shock was accompanied by an outflow of methane, but thankfully the gas did not ignite or explode. There were 52 workers in the area. 42 escaped from the endangered area on their own. Along the way, the concentration of methane is high, so you have to enter gradually and correct the ducts. Probably during the shock, the ducts had dropped in several places and become unsealed. We're increasing the pressure in the compressed air lines to push air further in. There are still 10 trapped miners on deck 412. In the morning, it was reported that the first group of rescuers had reached the 520-meter mark of the over kilometer-long passage, at the end of which the missing miners are most likely still trapped. In total, 12 teams of mine rescuers were involved in the rescue excavation. However, there are no signs of ignition or fire. Prime Minister MATEUSZ MORAWIECKI was in Jastrzębie-Zdrój today. The Polish state will not leave the families of miners to their own devices. In the case of the most recent tragedies, I've already ordered the swift transfer of financial support, and this is not on a one-off but on a continuous basis. The Borynia Zofiówka coal mine is located just 4.5 kilometers from the Pniówek mine, where the first methane explosions took place on Wednesday. As a result of the catastrophe there, 5 people died. Most communities in Silesia are associated with a mine. Miners live in most Silesian cities. Miners' families live. And we all express our solidarity with the victims' families. We express solidarity with the rescuers currently working in the Zofiówka mine. The Silesian voivode Jarosław Wieczorek called on tomorrow, April 24th, to abandon all events in the voivodeship as a sign of mourning for the dead miners. Flags have also been lowered to half-mast in the entire voivodeship as of yesterday. Well, 2 months since the beginning of the conflict, Russian troops are continuing their offensive in Donbass that began just a few days ago. The Ukrainian army has successfully repelled attacks in Donetsk and Lugansk. The tragedy of the civilian population in Mariupol, occupied by the Russian forces, continues. Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki today inaugurated the Stop Russia Now social campaign and announced further efforts by the government to introduce real sanctions by all European Union countries. Fierce fighting in Mariupol continues, and the Ukrainian military is continuing to defend itself despite Russian superiority. In the direction of Mariupol, the enemy continues to block our units near the Azovstal plant and conduct air raids on the city, including with the use of long-range planes. An engineering unit has arrived in the occupied city to demine Mariupol's port infrastructure. Civilians are hiding in the Azovstal metallurgical complex. Life trapped in a cage has become their everyday. We played on the phone, but we want to go home. We want to see the sun. I hope we can get out of here and see the sun because we've been sitting here for 2 months now. We want to live in Ukraine because this is our family home. The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, is constantly striving in the international forum to gain more support for his country. Right now, given the economic downturn and broken economic ties, we need up to $7 billion in financial support every month to make up for the economic losses. We'll need hundreds of billions of dollars to rebuild it all after and recover it after the war. The World Bank announced that it will donate nearly $5 billion to the reconstruction of Ukraine.
Has completed an early assessment of the physical damage. It puts the cost in terms of buildings and infrastructure, the narrow cost at roughly $60 billion. That doesn't include the growing economic costs to Ukraine's economy. And also, of course, the war is still ongoing, so those costs are rising. Ukraine's government and state-owned enterprises.
Today, Prime Minister MATEUSZ Morawiecki inaugurated the Stop Russia Now information campaign. The aim of the campaign is to put pressure on Western countries to cease all business with Russia. Today, these billboards will set off to various cities across Western Europe. This action will also be supported by a social media campaign. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has announced that he'll be going to Ukraine on a peace mission next week. Next week, I'll meet with President Vladimir Putin in Russia and President Volodymyr Zelensky in Ukraine. We need urgent steps to save lives, end human suffering, and bring about peace in Ukraine. Some countries are supporting Ukraine's fight by donating weapons. Canada's Minister of Defense announced that her state has provided howitzers to the war zones. Canada stands with Ukraine. We've delivered a number of M777 howitzers and associated ammunition in conjunction with the USA. We've also provided Ukraine with additional Carl Gustaf ammunition and will provide armored vehicles and other support. The Russians are conducting an offensive in the eastern part of Ukraine, at the same time firing at cities not located in the area of hostilities. The Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine informed that the Russians damaged more than 1,000 educational institutions. The amount of murder, rape, and looting is beyond estimation. And tomorrow, the French will decide who will take the presidency in their country for the next 5 years. The last polls before the second round of the elections, published yesterday evening, give the current president, Emmanuel Macron, a clear advantage over his rival, Marine Le Pen. Both candidates made final appeals to undecided voters on Friday, weighing concerns over what the Le Pen presidency might bring with their anger at Macron's achievements so far. According to the latest polls for Sunday's runoff, Macron, the centrist, pro-European current president, is leading the race against his anti-immigrant Eurosceptic rival by 10 to 14 points, well beyond the margin of error. Harris Interactive's Jean-Daniel Levy said Le Pen's win seemed unlikely. Marine Le Pen doesn't seem to be able to win the next presidential election, the gap being important between Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen. For Marine Le Pen to win this coming Sunday, we need three things. Firstly, a large abstention by voters who voted for Jean-Luc Mélenchon, a far-left leader who won around 21% of the votes in the last round of the presidential election. The second requirement is to see a large number of voters who didn't vote in the first round to go and vote for Marine Le Pen rather than Emmanuel Macron. The third thing would have to be a strong mobilization from right-wing voters who decided to change their voting behavior and to, in the end, vote for Marine Le Pen. In recent days, Macron has toned down his often harsh style by admitting that his attempts at economic and social reform had provoked the anger and discontent of many French. We should not get used to the rise of far-right ideas. I think there are differences in the Democratic and a Republican field. We should face each other off in a local or national election, but there are then differences of values between the categories of these ideas. 4 separate studies published on Thursday and Friday showed that Macron's result is stable or slightly increasing, however, ranging from 55 to 57%. Turnout was also given at the level of 72 to 74%, which would be the lowest result for the second round of the presidential election since 1969. And finally, the Orthodox Church in Ukraine celebrates Easter this weekend. Many Ukrainian refugees, however, have been forced to celebrate the holiday abroad this year and away from the Ukrainian men who are on the front lines fighting for Ukrainian freedom. Their hope in this special time is sustained through the sharing of religious spaces, like in Poland, through the cooperation of the Catholic Church. The beginning of Easter celebrations starts in Ukraine a week before the main ceremony that's taking place today and tomorrow. Orthodox Christians and believers of other Eastern rites, including Greek Catholics, celebrate the Feast of Holy Saturday on the 23rd of April. Liturgies are celebrated in the morning. Believers visit symbolic tombs of Christ, and the clergy consecrate food and commute to places where there are no Orthodox churches. The community is still obliged to keep a strict fast. The first meal without fasting will be Easter breakfast tomorrow morning. There's also a beautiful custom of decorating eggs with beeswax and dye. It's an iconic symbol of Easter in Ukraine, but also in Poland, due to the tragic difficulties for Ukrainians to celebrate in peace this year, and a large presence of Ukrainian refugees being hosted here in Poland. The Polish Catholic Church has decided to share its churches with non-Catholic Christians and allow them to hold their sacred services there. As usual, thanks very much for joining us this evening. Please stay with us for Poland Daily Weather, Poland Daily Business, and other programs. But from me, it's have a great Saturday night.